Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Minneapolis Area Realtors Housing Market Update for November. I'm Jackson Pineau. I am the Director of Public Affairs here at MAR, and we got a great set of slides for you today to get you to better understand the housing market, what's going on, and hopefully uplift some spirits in the final quarter of this year. I want to start off with a few quick notes. Let's hop into the slide deck for you here. Want to start off nice and early talking about 2024 Code of Ethics. Please, if you have not completed your mandatory Code of Ethics training by the end of the year, go and get that done now. And I know some of you are saying, Jackson, why are you talking to me about Code of Ethics in November? I still got a month. One, don't wait until the last month, please. Second, there is going to be no December webinar from me. Uh, I'm taking some PTO to go visit family during the holidays, and we don't have a backup for the webinar. And want to make sure that you guys know nice and early. There is no webinar. Don't worry. We still got plans to make sure that you have all the information that you need, but there is no live webinar on the third Thursday of December. So keep that in mind. I also know that our programs team works hard to get you an automated survey out immediately once this webinar is over. Now, when we are at a point where the market's changing, Mars services to you are trying to improve because of that. And I'm the, person leading this endeavor to make sure that you guys have the knowledge from this webinar to different tools. I want to make sure that I know your thoughts. So please use that survey, use the chat here in the webinar. If you're watching this on YouTube, please comment in the comments section. I read those as well. I want to know your thoughts. What questions do you have about the market? What information do you or your clients need that you wish you had? How do you want to get that info? Do you like it live, like we have here for the webinar? Do you want it on demand, like in YouTube videos? Do you want self-service tools or something different? Do you value listening directly with these sorts of videos, or do you want something that might be more engaging, you playing with the data yourself? And is this the right path forward? In light of some of those questions, I've taken a risk here. We're taking a bit of a shift away from the traditional charts that you do see. Not too big of a shift, but they're designed to be more straightforward, simplified, talking about the here and now. And you guys will see that. We want to make sure that we're always improving the services that we provide to you here as realtors at MAR. And one of those things that we're constantly looking at is how you receive that information, which includes the final point here in the quick notes, MAR's website update. Now, I don't have much information for you because I'm just the research guy, I'm not the website guy, but I do want to let you know, as fellow stats nerds, that some of the resources that you use here at MAR are going to look a little different. Simply put, they're packaged differently through our website update that's going to be happening around the start of the year. So, the uh, normal market data web page that you're probably used to is going to change, but keep in mind that the tools are still going to be there. You're still going to have access to InfoSparks. You're still going to have access to local market updates and everything else in Fat Stats. You're still going to have access to sortable statistics. It's just the web page is changing. We want to update it, make it fresh for you. Again, I don't have any further details for you on that. I just want to make sure, because I care about you and I want to make sure that you're prepared for it. Keep that in mind towards the start of the new year. We're going to get a facelift with the MAR website. So, without any further ado, let's jump into the October housing market update. Like I said, we're going to be looking at a new set of charts for you. It's very much similar. The content is still the same, and I hope you can see that we are zooming in on the areas that people tend to be most interested in here. So let me take this first slide and orient you all to what's going on here. Instead of seeing almost 2 decades worth of data, I'm showing you 4 very specific months. We're starting off here plain and simple with October of new listings. Uh, Before we dive into the data and what this shows us, just want to orient you, right? So what you are seeing here in the darkest blue, let me bring up my laser pointer here. Um, October 2024, our most recently completed month for new listings. We had 5,700 homes that were listed on the marketplace in our North Star MLS, right? Compare that to 1 month prior. That's that kind of medium blue bar, and you can see we went down a little bit. Now, these two bars off to the left, that's your October of 2023, exactly a year ago. And then the final bar, September of 2023, just as a reference point. I want to be able to show you with these 4 bars the change in what's happened in month over month, as well as the change that's happened in year over year. So let's dive into it so that way you can understand what this means in context, right? So, like I said, we finished October with 5,700 homes that were listed on the MLS. And that is down, as you can see between these two dark bars, about 5% from September of 2024, 2 months ago. But we are up about 13% from about 5,000 homes that were listed on the marketplace October of last year. So from year over year, you can see that increase. If I have a little fun little pen here for you, you draw that little visual line across, you can see we had a 13% increase. Now, what is interesting here, and something that we will talk about, the seasonality change that happens on a regular basis with some of these statistics, you have a drop from September of 23 to October of 23. Look at that drop down in new listings. Fewer people willing to put their home on the marketplace last year from September to October. Now, there are still fewer people from September to October of this year, but not as many people were, let's say, shy to put their homes on the marketplace. You're still seeing that seasonal dip from one to another, same as you are here, but generally, 2024 has been a market where people are more likely to put their home on the marketplace. Super interesting, right? I hope this is that first indicator for you. Things are going to continue in the same vein here for these monthly and year references for all of our metrics. So let's flip the script. Let's talk about the demand side of the equation. And because we started looking at things this way, we got to see some cool insight that we don't normally see. The relation between these 4 bars look different, don't they? Super cool, right? So October 2024, we had about 4,000 people close on sales, right? And that is up 7% from just a month ago, September of 2024. But wait a minute, some of you might be asking. Didn't you just say activity goes down a little bit? We just saw that with new listings, and you're right. Let's take a different perspective on this and take a look at historical average of closed sales just for a minute, right? And you can see in a normal year, this is the average of all closed sales. We peak. Our demand peaks in June, July, August, and it goes down throughout the fall. You kind of see that downward slump getting into December, right? That's not necessarily the case of what we saw in October relative to September just 2 months ago. In fact, demand went up 7%. Now that is fascinating, right? We see that more people are willing to close on homes in October rather than September. Exactly the opposite of what we saw in those historical trends, right? Now let's look at year over year. So October of last year, 3,800 people closed on homes. And yeah, that's a 6% increase from where we were last month. But September is that September of 2023 and October of 2023 show that more normal relationship. A pretty big drop off, in fact, right? And this shows you, if you're probably working with buyers right now, that something feels different this year compared to last year. Last year, man, we were down in the doldrums, weren't we? We had a huge drop off from September of last year to October of last year. There was, let's see, 4,200 to 3,800-ish homes that weren't closed on, that's a drop. But we're seeing the reverse of that this year. More activity, a spike, if you will. Now, we'll go into more detail of this later, but it's not necessarily a spike as the last year, these faded blue bars, that was just a particularly bad year. We were really feeling the impact of the recession, right? Okay, the historical average. Let's take a look for the future and looking at October pending sales, which are likely to be November's closed sales, right? We're seeing a similar story here. Last year, traditional seasonal decline. This year, the reverse. There's more activity in October for pending sales than there were for September pending sales. That increase is something we don't normally see. And again, we are seeing, let's see, a 15-ish% increase from October of 2024, October of 2023. Look at that growth that we're seeing in 1 year. Super impressive, right? Now, let's set this into a wider context, right? We were struggling to combat inflation in the past 2 years. And September of 2023, we were seeing the tail end of that. This year, especially the later half of 2024, we're getting back to more of a normal housing market performance, especially in these direct regards with demand and supply, sales and listings. So, want to make sure we simplify this. Takeaways for you, for your business, for your buyers and your sellers, right? Because I understand new bar charts, new context. I want to make sure it's straightforward for you here. So sales and listings. What are the main takeaways that I want to make sure that you know for your buyers or your sellers? For buyers, competition has returned. We saw that just in this last chart. Pending sales, which are going to be November's closed sales, right? Look at that increase in competition. Look at that increase in demand. That competition has returned. But on the other side, looking at the listing side, if you have buyers as clients, more listings means more options. That's good, right? In the long run, we are seeing more listings than we did in October of last year, and that's a good thing for buyers. Now, on the seller side of the equation here, buyers are back. They're really back. I mean, they're really back, right? And now I don't want you to see this as, I'm so excited because we have a surge like we did in 2020 and 2021. Remember what kicked that off? That was COVID. That was the Federal Reserve saying, hey, let's inject as much money as we can into the economy, right? Buyers are back to normal or whatever a new normal is now, right? So keep that in mind when you're talking to your seller clients, right? Sellers are responding to that demand. That's why, even though we're seeing a seasonal decrease from September to October, year over year, there's still that growth. And that's the long-term sustainable growth that we want to see. Sellers are responding to demand, so don't shy away from it. And also, relative to what we've just been talking about, there's normally that winter lull. We saw that in uh that kind of bell chart, right? Looking at the seasons from one month to another, right? Um, it isn't felt as much when you are seeing an economic rebound, right? That rebound is what you're really feeling rather than the fact that, oh, it's the fourth quarter, oh, it's November, oh, it's December. Enjoy that while that's still here, right? All right, let's talk about money now, right? Let's talk about October median sales price. Month over month, not much has changed, right? 380,000-ish for a median sales price in September of 2024. Same thing for October of 2024. Where the noticeable change here is year over year. And really, that's what we're aiming for, right? We've talked about this in the past of the traditional increase that we would see from 1 month to the following year's same month. So in this case, October 23 to October 24 would be about 6.5%. We're not quite there, it seems. Oh, and this is not 380, this is 365. My apologies. Um, we're not quite there yet. We are at a 4% increase. But unlike what we saw last year, where September we were at just over 370 as a median sales price, and we dipped below to again 365 here. The month over month change is relatively flat. And again, which one is the odd person out or the odd number out here? Let's take a look again at the historical average for median sales price. And I want you to not question whether or not the prices are right. In fact, I've removed the price scale because it doesn't make sense. We're looking at years worth of data. Those change over time. But I do want you to see the trend here. Prices tend to increase as the summer months come up. They peak in June and then they wane off, right? More negotiation, homes stay on the market longer. They want to make sure that they sell by the end of the year, those sort of soft incentives, right? And more particularly, I want you to look at this area, right? So let's follow September and October all the way up. And look, for the average change in median sales price, it doesn't change all that much, right? Laser pointer right here, this area. It's not that big of a change. Certainly not the same between August and September. But look, here's the big change. This it's good news, but it's not outstanding because we don't see a normal change historically in median sales price between September and October. But this shows that, yeah, man, we were really feeling it. People were willing to make compromises again to 365. Um, let's move on and talk about those negotiations, right? October original list price in October of 2024, most recently completed month, the average original list price received was about, let's say, 98%, right? 98% on average is what people received relative to their original list price, right? That is a decrease compared to not only last month, but this same time last year, right? In October of last year, 98.5, almost 0.5% more, right? Or a little bit more, in fact. And this is an indicator to us that the competitive offers that we were seeing in the pandemic have definitely eased off, and we're going back kind of a pendulum swing into a realm of more negotiations than we do see historically, at least for this time in the year. Specifically, I mean, look at September of 2023, we were up to, 99.2% of what people originally asked for, they got on average, right? Let's take one more look at it, and I just think this is pretty insightful. We like to make sure that we're taking as many variables out of the equation as we can, right? Because sometimes more expensive homes are bigger homes, right? Let's strip that away and just look at October median price per square foot, right? And you can see slightly different story, a slightly more rosy story. If we're stripping away those price per square foot, the square footage, and just making sure that we're looking at price itself equal to square foot, right? The October 2024 price per square foot has gone up about, let's say, 0.5%, right? From $196 per square foot just a month ago. And that is a 1.5% increase from what we were seeing this time last year, right? People are still buying smaller homes, but the value is retaining because that competition's there, just like what we were seeing in the blue charts, right? So again, want to make sure that it's simplified for you. These are the takeaway points that I saw in these charts. For buyers, price growth has slowed intentionally. There was an intention behind it. It was to prevent run-on inflation, right? And that's worked. We're seeing that even off now, and we know that the prices are going to return to their historic pace. Like I said, an increase annually of 6.5%, right? And here's the sunny side, negotiations are back. Now, for the sellers, negotiations are back. Sorry. And they're likely to swing back the other way in time, but you might see more offers that require negotiation, especially like we will see a little sneak peek for the next slide, slower market times. Home prices are growing though, right? We were concerned that we were going to see year over year decreases. And while we saw the normal seasonal month over month decreases that we normally expect, right? They weren't really that big. And in fact, we just showed on the last screen that relative to price per square foot, they've gone up, right? So the major risk of loss in the long term, knock on wood, is over, right? That's us seeing light at the end of the tunnel. So let's take a look at the pace of the market and inventory as a final cap of these types of charts, right? And like I said, we're reaching a slower market here. This is as we would normally see as we get into the later parts of the year. September was faster than October. October median cumulative days on market 25. Half of all homes sold within 25 days. And that is slower than what we saw in September. Not surprising. We saw the same thing from September to October last year. But October of 23 to October of 24, we are seeing that notable slowing of the market, right? October 23, half of all homes sold in under 20 days. Now it's half of all homes sold in under 25. Now, 5 more days, nominally, maybe that's not too much, but on the whole, that is a 20% increase, right? That's noticeable. Um, Something to keep in mind, right? Um, 25% increase, my apologies. But let's talk about the inventory problem, right? We talk about inventory as though it's a problem, and we'll talk about that in a historical context here in a minute. But some people, all things are relative, right? Might be seeing this as a relatively good thing. It depends on what side of the table you're on. If you're a buyer, you see a higher inventory in October of 2024, 10,000 homes left on the MLS at the end of October. Relative to the same time last year, only 9,000 homes left on the market. That's 1,000 more homes roughly that are left on the market. More options for me. Awesome, right? Yeah, it's down from September of 2024, which again, usually the market goes a little bit slower. So there's again more activity going on month to month. There's fewer homes left on the market in October of this year than in September of this year, 4% fewer. But this year over year shift, that's the interesting thing, right? 9% increase, very interesting. And why is it interesting, right? Because, and I'm bringing back some of the historical data. Don't worry, sometimes it is vital that we show things in a long term chart like this. Now, what I am showing you is just the month of October for 24, 23, 22, all the way back to 2004. These are just October month's supply of inventory, right? And as I'm sure some of you are aware, the threshold to make sure it's a balanced market is somewhere between 4 to 6 months supply of inventory. I'm going to bring up that 4 month supply of inventory here in that dotted line. And this is why we call it a problem. And this is why that increase back up to that red dotted line might be a good thing for your buyers, right? That red dotted line is that minimum threshold to make sure it's a balanced market, a roughly equal number of buyers to sellers. And since 2014, we have been in a strong seller's market. We saw that dip go down sharply into 2021, and we've been recovering ever since. We are now at about 2.7 months supply of inventory, right? Year over year change, we've been going up, right? We haven't quite hit that minimum red dotted line threshold to be back into a balanced market. In fact, we've been undersupplied for about a decade here. And that's why we see it as a supply problem, a supply shortage, right? Now let's shift back into those new charts that we're talking about. Looking at it, we can see 2.7 months supply of inventory, October, just like the last chart showed. And this was that most recently adjacent bar in that last chart, 2.5 months supply, a 8% increase from October of last year to October of this year, right? Seasonal decrease that we normally would think is reversed. There's more activity in October of this year than there was in September. September was more, I'm going to use air quotes here, more of a buyer's market. Think about that for a second. There's more leverage that your seller has in October than 2 months ago. Really interesting, right? So, what are those main takeaways that I want you to think about here? For the buyer side, we're used to a decade of undersupply at this point, right? And so any relative gain, month over month, year over year, whatever it is, if there's more leverage that the buyer could have relative to a couple of years ago, it feels like a good thing, right? But keep in mind, air quotes again, a slower market means more time to make the right decision for you, not like it was in 2021, 2022. And again, on the seller side, slower is relative, right? Yes, the market is slower. Inventory has gone up year over year, but it's doing some wonky seasonal things right now. There's more competition now in October than there was in September. Keep track on that. Follow that with your selling clients and make sure that you guys are at least aware of how active we are in October as far as demand goes. Yes, it might take you longer to sell your home than it did 2 years ago, but remember, 2 years ago was an exception rather than the rule. We're reestablishing what that norm looks like. And again, big picture here, this is a strong seller's market. 2 to 3 months supply of inventory is, at the end of the day, a seller's market. All right. So I'm gonna keep things relatively short and digestible here for you because we just chatted about the same stats that we normally do, but with very different visuals. And I want to leave time for questions. So we're gonna jump right into the other big thing that people are always concerned about, the larger economy. Let's zoom out here for a minute. And I know what some of you are thinking immediately. You're thinking, Jackson, earlier this month, we had a huge election. Some of you are really pumped. Some of you are really not. Either way, it's important. It's on people's mind. And I want to make sure that you guys understand the gravity of that election in the right context. And I plead, do not jump to conclusions of what you're immediately thinking right now, one way or another, right? Because the reality of it is, from your local stats nerd and from those at NAR, the election years do not negatively or positively impact real estate market or small business. If it has any impact at all, it is nominal. If you're really trying to read the tea leaves, you might be able to see it in some sort of showing time activity, right? But it doesn't have a lasting, significant impact. At least the election years do not. What could potentially have impact, however, and that's a complicated question to ask. The things that do have more of an impact, kind of like what we've been talking about already, colder season, the unemployment rate, mortgage interest rates, those are the things we really watch for. The things that the soon to be inaugurated President Trump might have on his agenda as a president in conjunction with the House of Representatives and the Senate being aligned with the Republican Party as their majorities, those those will end up providing more clarity to us on whether or not this is a good thing or bad thing for our industry in 2025. It's a complicated question to ask, regardless of what your own personal political affiliations are. It's more complicated than you give it credit for. I feel like I have a baseline understanding, and it's more complicated than I give it credit for. So let's go through some of those potential ideas, right? So again, GOP controls the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And that does mean a higher potential for policy changes. And that's the thing from an economic lens, we need to be paying attention to. From a small business lens, we need to be paying attention to that, not the politics of it. Things that are more direct, like economic and job growth potential based off of the laws that they pass, then that might have an impact, right? Tax reform, 2017, the Trump era tax policies had a notable shift in people's buying habits with high capital products like homes. Things like tariffs, tariffs on imported goods may impact our supply chain, good or bad, right? And the writing of those laws may impact supply of homes and building material, right? Some indirect things, immigration. We know that immigration was a forefront topic of the President Trump uh, messaging. And we know that that does have an indirect impact on labor, whether or not it's direct building labor, agricultural labor, or something more indirect. Well, we don't know until we see a policy passed directly pointing to the extent of immigration reform on the labor industry and whether or not it is a positive or negative impact, right? Final thing, a US deficit conversation needs to be had here because we have the Conservative Party that is in charge. And a conversation they regularly have is concerns around debt and the US deficit and making sure that that is addressed. Any significant changes around debt practices here in the United States may have an indirect impact on many industries. And that is the reality here. There's more to consider than you think. Keep in mind that the real impact on what we're focused on here, the Twin Cities housing market performance, is more complex than anything you can hear in a soundbite, whether it comes from a mainstream news source, an alternative news source, social media, or your political friend who really knows everything, you know? It's complicated. Let's pay attention and see where this goes in the next year. All right, enough with the political stuff. Let's talk about interest rates. 30-year fixed rate mortgage average in the United States has crept back up to 6.8%. Some areas are saying 7. Yes, we are seeing a return. When the Federal Reserve changed their interest rates, we started to see a decrease, and now we're seeing a bit of a recovery of 30-year fixed rate mortgage averages in the United States. Let's keep in mind that, yes, we started the year at 7.4, so about 0.5% higher, right? But this is a rebound that we are seeing from a a 2-decade high of almost 8% here. We are lower than that where we were about a year and a half ago, right? Uh, Compared to 2008, which is the most recent metric that I could find that didn't have to do with the COVID-19 inflation, right? We are at a mortgage rate that is similar to where we were in 2008. And for those of you who were engaged in business in '08 and prior, you might remember that it's not that this was a high, but this was more of the norm. If we were to go back further in time here, what we are seeing from 2004 to 2008 at about, let's say, 5 to 6 percent, 5, 6, maybe 7% is the historical average. It's not uncommon to see these numbers. It's uncommon, and boy, was it sweet to see these low numbers for a decade or more, right? Again, context is everything. Um, and we know what's causing this, right? It is the Federal Reserve's funds effective rate that this is their let's call it like a lever of how high do they want to raise that lever and how low they want to raise that lever is the flow of money that's injected into the economy. Essentially, the lower it is, the more money that's in the economy, the higher it is, the more money they're saving for themselves in the Federal Reserve, right? And we have been coming off of that effort to combat run-on inflation since 2022. And now we're easing back off of it. That's what we're seeing here. Now, because I want to make sure you're informed about why this is happening, because it helps you understand how to read the tea leaves and predict what's happening in the future. Everybody's asking for that crystal ball, and I'm here to show you my work of what I look at when I'm trying to predict the future. Of course, I'm looking at the Fed and I'm looking at this federal funds effective rate and see that we are consistent. We have two instances of going down now. They want more money in the economy. And I ask myself, why? What are they turning to, right? And this is where I want to bring in a live source for you all. We're just going to Chrome and we're looking straight at the press release from the Federal Reserve. And I'm highlighting to you, zoom in so y'all can see it relatively well, just the first couple words here. Recent indicators suggest that activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. Federal Reserve is happy. Since earlier in the year, labor market conditions have generally eased. Now, for us, what does that mean? The exact charts that I showed you earlier talking about the housing market. At a national scale, we are rebounding back to a normal state, an equilibrium, if you will. They're seeing that not only in housing, but in other industries as well. What else do they look at? Unemployment rate has moved up, but remains low, right? It's at about 2%. We'll actually look at the chart here in a minute for that. Finally, another thing that they look at, uh, consumer price index, inflation of goods, right? It's made progress towards its 2% objective, although it remains somewhat elevated. What are they looking at? They're looking at this chart right here and see what happened in 2022. They were concerned that all goods and services were increasing at a rate of 9% year over year. That's unsustainable. So they pulled that lever. They made sure there was less money in the economy, and now it's shrunk down to about 2.5% on average. That's the goal that they're trying to hit. Now, again, another thing that they're concerned about is labor force, whether people have the money to be able to actually spend on goods and services, and that requires employment. We look at unemployment as the relative measure of that and how little unemployment there is. And you can see that we finished at about 3% here in the Twin Cities. And it's been generally by this green line trending upwards, right? But it hasn't capped over 3, 4% regularly. So they're fairly happy with this. Now, keep in mind, I tried to throw together this chart last minute simply because the Bureau of Labor Statistics, who makes their own charts, it's scary bad. And I'll just give you a little show of what that looks like. Ah, it's really bad. So let's take a look at this one and just say, yes, generally here in the Twin Cities, unemployment has remained low. As we just said, our industry is rebounding, and the CPI, inflation, how much things cost, is staying low. Those are all good signs that the economy is recovering as normal, and we want to make sure that people capitalize on it. So again, final takeaways for you here in the economy. From the buyer's perspective, yes, I totally appreciate that interest rates on your mortgage, what you're seeing right now, is higher than what you saw in a couple years past. But I really want you to struggle with this question. I don't bring it up facetiously. Is it worth timing your purchase in order for you to get the best interest rate? Do you remember seeing in that first chart from the Federal Reserve in Missouri that we saw interest rates go down and then they rebounded a little bit? That that kind of zigzagging effect may happen multiple times. Do you really want to time it incorrectly? And that's a genuine question. Some people might say, yes, Jackson, at the end of the day, this is a monthly payments decision I need to make. And interest rate is the biggest impactor to monthly payments for me. And if that's the case, hey, go ahead and wait. But if it's not the case and you're just looking for a better deal on something you can already afford, why are you biding your time? Why are you missing out on that opportunity, especially when prices will return to those historic gains of 6.5%? The only question is, how quickly will they return? From the seller side, it's a similar question. Are you married to your current rate? I've shown in charts prior to this presentation that over 90% of people who have 30-year mortgages right now have a mortgage that's under the current rate. But is that difference in savings enough to disincentivize you from buying that new home that you want, right? That's a decision that you and your clients are going to have to make, right? And then finally, if the answer is no, I want to buy that new home, I don't care if the monthly mortgage payment is about $50 more a month. Are you ready to put yourself in the buyer mindset here about timing purchases appropriately, about monthly payments that fit, around weighing the option of a fairer monthly mortgage payment versus the increase of prices back to historic norms, right? Things for you to consider with your clients. I hope you find this information helpful. I hope you found the new perspective to be fresh and insightful for you. Obviously, we still have about 15 minutes here. I want to leave time for questions in the chat here live stream, but I will end the recording here to make sure that you can follow the YouTube and put any comments, questions that you have in the comments, and I will go ahead and answer them there. Thank you all for joining me, and I hope you make sure you take advantage of the resources that we have here at MAR. Thanks, everybody.